Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Why No One Plays. It's a video series I have running on my channel where I discuss champions in League of Legends that are rarely seen in solo queue and competitive, especially in the past few years. And I think today's character is probably the most fitting champion for the series, considering he's literally an old man. So let's talk about Zilean. Being a timekeeper who supposedly has control over time, it's pretty ironic for him to be one such champion that hasn't aged very well, figuratively speaking. Exil made a video on him earlier this year, which I definitely suggest you watch because he does a decent job breaking down his long history, but I'm approaching things from a different angle. Instead of his past, I'm going to be talking about his future, or currently the present, which isn't really looking that great. As usual, before I begin, I want to first welcome everyone if this is your first time watching one of my League videos, and to address all of the Zilean mains who will inevitably watch the video, just a quick disclaimer. The Why No One Plays series isn't meant to be taken literally. Obviously there are people who play Zilean, otherwise I wouldn't be making the video. And it's also not a champion hate video. I will be looking at the champion in question rather critically, but it's not to discourage anyone from playing them, more just to break down and discuss possible reasons as to why they may not see as much popularity compared to others. With that said, if you enjoy watching this video, then at the end of it please be sure to leave a like and comment down below your own thoughts on Zilean if you have any, and should you want to watch any other videos, I have a playlist of over 15 other champions I covered before him, so please take a look at them too if you're interested. Introduction aside, let's just get right into it. Having covered close to 20 champions by now, if you've watched any Why No One Plays video before, you'll notice that there's a perpetual theme going on with each champion, and that's not just a coincidence. When it comes to the progression of time, video games, especially player versus player, usually have groups of characters that have varying results when withstanding the test of time. Taking a look at the first 20 champions added to the game, almost none of them are the same as when they've been released. In fact, of those 20 champions, half have received complete visual gameplay updates, making them pretty much apple and orange if we were to compare them based on who they are now versus who they were before. That's not really a bad thing, mind you, as games grow and evolve even if the playing field stays relatively the same, such as Pokemon, Smash Bros, Fire Emblem, Final Fantasy, and Minecraft to name a few. Just by continuously adding new content to the game, whether it's characters, items, or systems, the game naturally just ages. And some of the original content may not adjust well if they weren't already built that way to begin with. That's why there exists the phrase future-proof, which is thrown around a lot in the video game community because players want to invest time and energy into things that can last a long time, right? Where Zilean comes into this is a very curious situation because he's probably the only champion out of the original 20 who has mostly the exact same abilities nearly a decade ago as he does now, the only exception being his passive, but I'll get into that later. His champion design is very simple in nature but extremely multi-dimensional in application. For all intents and purposes, Zilean has aged well conceptually. I know the joke around modern champions is that their ability descriptions look like Yu-Gi-Oh cards that have 100,000 different effects on them, but I personally could see him as a very interesting champion if he were to be released right now at this moment as a brand new champion. So why am I contradicting myself by saying Zilean has aged well but also aged poorly? That's because while his kit and playstyle meet the standards of modern champion design when it comes to depth, players' perception of Zilean has stagnated for the most part, and he's never really been able to see much front page action. He was more of a pocket pick that some supports or mid laners would have in case they wanted to try something a little more off-kilter. Reason being is because when you think of time, you think of patience and impatience. Speeding things up, slowing things down, turning back time, all of the basic facets of time manipulation are present in Zilean's kit. But the only people who would appreciate them are those who have an eye for methodology, foresight, and seeing the bigger picture. Exactly the opposite of what 99% of gamers focus on. Zilean represents the antithesis of your everyday League of Legends player. He prefers to be the tactician plotting out moves and counter moves from the general's tent, rather than being the hothead commander leading the front lines. He is designed to be a control support mage, stacking the deck in his team's favor for a swift and easy win. Very macro-focused champion, that's often why you see him more commonly in pro play rather than solo queue. While he performs this job excellently, it's not a very appealing experience for a game like League of Legends. With the game state being aggression-centric pretty much ever since Season 6, players prefer to be the ones to shoot the cannon rather than plan the next move. So while his kit and playstyle is executed competently, it's basically for the wrong target audience. In fact, many of us are wired to expect immediate results out of things. Almost every consistently popular champion is about hitting you hard and fast. Kha'Zix, Camille, Lucian, Graves, Rengar, Akali, Yasuo, Irelia, Lee Sin, Katarina, Zed, Darius, Pyke. What each of these champions have in common is that they waste no time getting things done, and they can get them done fast even if it's at the cost of being slightly less effective in the late game. Which is a moot point if you build up a hard snowball early on and close out games before it gets to that. I don't mean to imply that Zilean is specifically a late game champion. He's pretty consistent in power at any point in time, but is mostly effective the longer the game goes on because his cooldowns and ability metrics mature very well. Chances are you remember Zilean ulting a tank after you spent so much time taking him down only for them to respawn back up to full HP. Regardless of if he's played mid or support, whether it's 15 minutes or 35, your goal as Zilean is to assert territorial dominance around the map by either using your abilities offensively to augment your own team's movements, or using them defensively to disrupt the enemy team's movements. No matter how you utilize him, it's about setting things up to either help your team succeed or prevent the enemy team from succeeding. His methodical play is a bit different from the likes of other champions I talked about like Kayle, Nasus, and Kog'Maw because their issue is that they played slow due to taking too long to get an important power spike, such as reaching a certain level or getting their core items. Alternatively, there's the likes of Anivia and Aurelion Sol, who simply struggle with being way too slow to effectively put their raw power to good use. Zilean isn't necessarily a slow champion in movement actually, quite the contrary, he has some of the highest tempo in the game since he can go super speedy. And his abilities aren't slow either because he can use them all in relatively quick succession with everything except his Q being an instant cast. Slow champions take a while to ramp up in power, whether it's through their power spikes or the usage of their abilities, meaning they can still make a significant impact if things go perfectly, but for Zilean, even if the situations are most ideal for him, there's only so much that he can do. No other support can grant a movement speed buff to a teammate or target slow an enemy anywhere close to Zilean's time warp. No one can provide bonus experience to a teammate like Zilean can. No one can literally auto-revive an ally champion. Zilean's abilities are pretty much one of a kind, divergent from what you would expect on your typical enchanter, which would usually be shields, maybe buffs, attack speed, or heals. But therein lies the issue. Each support and/or enchanter such as Janna, Sona, Karma, Nami, Yuumi, Lulu, Taric, and Soraka have varying individual ranges of effectiveness in how much they can bolster their teammates. For example, Janna is probably the most consistent enchanter of this list. She sits around a 70 to 130% range from a bad Janna to a good Janna. These figures are purely arbitrary, I'm just using them for the sake of argument. The enchanter with the most extreme range is probably Yuumi, as some Yuumis can be absolutely worthless, and others can single-handedly win a fight for their team if supporting the right ally at the right time. So we'll put her at range of about 40% to 160. I think you get the idea. Zilean's range of effectiveness is the most balanced of all enchanters in my opinion, having something like 85 to 115%. To some, this may be an appealing characteristic since it means the burden of performance is not as inconsistent on Zilean relative to his peers. Conversely, that also means no matter how remarkable the player is with their presence of mind and micromanagement, Zilean has a much lower maximum impact. This might be the part where some of you may argue that his contribution can be infinite because having a revive for an ultimate effectively turns fights into a 6v5. That may sound true on paper, but the reason why it isn't really as amazing as you think is because in most cases, Zilean's ult is used defensively to save a teammate who made a mistake or got caught out in a bad spot. Either way, it's unlikely that your team is in a good position to continue the fight because some teamfights can declare a winning team in the 3 seconds it takes for your teammate to revive. Especially with how much faster and more explosive fights are getting, not to mention cooldown reduction being far more prevalent in modern League of Legends as opposed to back then. And even if you used your ultimate on let's say a tank after they soak up the brunt of enemy team's retaliation, chances are you've already won the fight anyway, so it's somewhat of a moot point. This would be an entirely different story if Chrono Shift was an insta-revive, like the moment the target's health drops to 0, it instantly recovers and they can keep fighting. Then that would be unequivocally the most powerful ability in the game. But because of that 3-second deactivation period, it's not as amazing as you might think. Also, he can revive only one person. If your entire team gets Malphite Yasuo combo, then your ultimate ain't gonna do jack. Time Warp can either boost an ally or slow an enemy by a very high amount, and for a very long time, but while movement speed is certainly helpful, in some cases a shield or an attack speed buff or a heal is more important. Again, League of Legends has this sort of pervasive power creep of speed with way more dashes than ever before. Movement speed never matters against a champion with a dash, or if you're crowd controlled. In that sense, shields, heals, and buffs give more combat stats which can be put to better use. Plus, almost every enchanter has a slow and a movement speed buff in their kit. Lulu, Soraka, Nami, Karma, Janna, Yuumi, basically all of them can speed their allies while slowing down enemies, just not to the same degree. But the way movement speed is calculated, it has diminishing returns the higher you go. For example, a 50% slow versus a 99% slow is not nearly as big as a 50% slow versus a 10% slow. Additionally, since Zilean lacks any consistent restoration in his kit, he doesn't benefit from items that supplement those abilities, such as Ardent Sensor, Redemption, Adin's Unholy Grail as such. I don't know much about the new support items during the preseason, but I'm mostly referring to his performance over the past few years. Basically, Zilean can only really build full AP or glacial augment items back in the day, which did work for him, but severely restricted his build options so he doesn't get as much mileage from item power spikes. My last point is that Zilean's entire kit is designed to enable his teammates. There is very little solo carry potential within him, except just being really good at using your bombs to do damage and zone. Zilean himself lacks a lot of playmaking potential and only really serves to set his teammates up for success, meaning most of the time, you either have to hope the other 4 players on your team know how to capitalize on the unique benefits you bring to the table, otherwise you're almost invariably screwed. Yes, I'm aware all enchanters are like this and that they're only as strong as the allies they support, but usually many enchanters can make big plays through supporting their allies. For example, a Lulu can get a huge knockup with Wild Growth, or Soraka can silence the enemy Sylas and Katarina jumping on her AD carry. Zilean has the same potential, but aside from landing a double bomb stun, there's very little he can do besides speed up a teammate, slow down an ally, or save someone who took a little too much damage. This is usually why you tend to see him played a lot in the professional scene, because communications and synergy are things to take into consideration when playing Zilean. Someone may be more emboldened if they know they're going to be ulted, or you can tag some cool combos such as putting a bomb on a tank and they engage in for some extra boom. Since his kit works best in more specific situations as opposed to being all-purpose like a heal or shield, he can only really function at 100% if there's some level of communication between you and your teammates, which is a very tall order in solo queue when everyone has anime main character syndrome and just prefers to do their own thing, irregardless of how their teammates are doing. Because he's unconventional from other enchanter supports, players typically don't know how to make best use of him, especially in high-pressure situations where you rely more on instinct than intellect. And even if you do know how to use him, his very niche role makes him really good only in fringe cases, not as a general support or mid laner to play. He's just inconsistent because of these factors, and if you were to play Zilean, you essentially surrender personal agency to the game to grant specific benefits to your team that few others can offer, which is not a viable trade-off for most people. It's a shame really, his design is genius, all of his abilities make sense from a narrative point of view, and when you look at him, aside from his very obvious appearance, it really feels like you're manipulating time in yours or against the enemy team's favor. Unfortunately, his playstyle doesn't match and in some cases is just diametrically opposed to the personality of most players. If on the other hand he was reworked to be a purely solo lane mage, that might be an interesting prospect because there's a lot of things you can do with time magic, but as of right now, the champion update to-do list is Cho'Gath, Nocturne, Quinn, Rammus, Shaco, Shyvana, Skarner, Tryndamere, and Udyr. So suffice to say Zilean won't be looked at anytime soon. Thing is, some of the school thought that Zilean may not need a rework. Again, his kit is perfectly well balanced, and if played in the right circumstances, he could be the best support for that role, since again, he does things no other champion can, at the very least not to the same degree. So I think it probably depends on the context of if he's fine as is or if he isn't. And I think another thing to consider is that whether or not he's meant to be a main to begin with, maybe there are just some champions that are supposed to be only pocket picks that you pick in very specific cases. After all, Zilean hasn't received a single balance change in like over 5 years. As Exil describes, he's one of the most balanced champions in the game. That about wraps up for this episode. Let me know your thoughts on Zilean in the comment section below if you have any, of course. Positive or negative doesn't matter. I want to hear everything, just as long as it's not a rage or rant post. And for all the Zilean mains out there, what did you think of the video? Do you agree with the points I made, or do you think I was incorrect about something? Please let me know about that as well. I don't respond to every comment, but I do read all of them, so even if you write a 20-page long essay, I'm more than happy to take a look at it. Guys, if you'd like to support my work, best way to do so is to comment, share, subscribe, like the video, check out my other videos if you're interested, join my Discord server if you want to talk more about general gameplay stuff or if you want to ask for advice on climbing. I do offer coaching, so if anyone is serious about climbing and or wants to go the extra mile to support my channel, consider donating to my Patreon, it would be very much appreciated. One last note, take a look at some of my other Why No One Plays videos and check out my sister series called Why Everyone Plays, which is essentially the opposite of Why No One Plays, where I talk about the super popular champions. Anyway, that's gonna be it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon for the next video. Take care.